Welcome to Mrs. Neller's notes for her double block algebra class. These are the notes for section 6.1 entitled Solving Inequalities Using Addition and Subtraction. And today we're going to solve and graph one-step inequalities, and we're going to see inequalities that have addition and subtraction in them. Now before we actually see the inequality, we have to refresh our memory on what an inequality actually is. An inequality means when things aren't equal. So if they're not equal, then one is bigger than the other, or one is smaller than the other amount. So we have less than and greater than that we use to compare two amounts that are not equal. So you can have less than, or you can have less than or equal to, and you can have greater than or greater than or equal to. So those are the inequality signs that we're going to be seeing in this chapter. So we're going to be given an inequality, which is basically an equation that has an inequality sign, but we're going to solve it just like we solve an actual equation. So to undo addition, we'll subtract. To undo subtraction, we'll add. To undo multiplication, we'll divide. To undo division, we'll multiply. Okay? Now, when you're solving an inequality with addition and subtraction, you don't have to change any of the inequality signs. And in the next section, in section 6.2, we'll be dealing with multiplication and division. And anytime you multiply or divide by a negative number, then you have to switch the inequality sign. You have to flip it around. So if it's less than, you have to flip it so it's greater than. Or if it's greater than, you have to flip it so it's less than. But we'll deal more with that in the next section. Now, one other tip you need to know for today is that we're also going to graph our solutions on a number line. Anytime you're dealing with an inequality, it's good math form to graph it on a number line. And when we graph, we're going to mark the actual answer with either an open circle or a solid circle. The open circle is used when we just have less than or greater than. The equality sign, when you have less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, that means that your number is part of that solution, so you want a solid circle. That solid circle shows that that number is actually part of your answer. The open circle in math, that means that that number is not actually an answer, it's not actually a solution, but anything just less than or just greater than it will be a solution. Okay, so let's take a look at our examples. We're going to solve these and then we'll graph them on a number line. So for part A, we have x plus 15 is greater than 22. So just like our one-step equations, if you want to box in the variable, you can. And then to get rid of the plus 15 that's attached to the x, we have to do the opposite. So we have to subtract 15. And the 15 and the minus 15 cancel. And I'm going to leave my greater than sign. And then 22 minus 15 is 7. So there's my solution. X is greater than 7. And then I have to graph that on a number line. Now, you don't have to draw a whole number line. We just need the answer and then one number to the right and one number to the left. Okay? Now, this was a greater than. There was no equal to. So I'm just going to mark the 7 with an open circle. And then I want to shade on the number line everything that's greater than 7. Well, everything that's greater than 7 goes to the right. So that's how you show your solution on a number line. I like to use a little squiggly line so that way it shows up a little bit better. Some students just like to do a solid line. Just be careful if you make it really dark and really thick. In the past, I've had some students that just make this big solid pencil line, and then if it's wrong and they erase it, it gets all smudgy. So just be careful of making too permanent of a mark. But if you want to use highlighters or colored pencils or something like that, you can Just remember that if you make a mistake, you have to be able to erase it or redraw it. Okay, now for part B, I have to solve for y. So I have negative 7 plus y is less than negative 13. So again, if you want to box in the y, you can. I'm going to get rid of that negative 7 by adding 7 to both sides. So that isolates the y. So y is less than, and negative 13 plus 7 is going to be negative 6. So there's my solution. And then to put that on a number line, I need the negative 6, and then one number to the right and one number to the left. Since it's a less than, I'm just going to do an open circle. And I'm going to shade everything to the left because I want all the stuff less than negative 6. Okay, for part C, I have to simplify this just a little bit first because I don't like this minus a negative 12. Really, that's our plus 12 is greater than or equal to 25. So you might see some of those types of problems where you need to simplify it a little bit first before you can actually solve it. But we've seen that with our equations as well, so you should be familiar with that process. So when I subtract 12 to get the r by itself, I'll get r is greater than or equal to 13. Now this time I have a greater than or equal to, so I'm going to put 13 and 14 and 12 on my number line. And since I have that equal to, I'm going to mark my answer with a solid circle. And then since it's greater than, I'm going to shade everything to the right. Okay, for part D now, this is slightly different from the other ones that we've done because the variable's on the right side. Now with equations, that's not an issue, but with inequalities, we like our variables to be on the left. So I can still solve it the way it is, but when I get done, I want to make sure that I rewrite it so that my variable's on the left side. So if I'm going to get the x by itself, I'm going to have to add the 4 to the other side of the inequality. So I'll have 13 is greater than or equal to x, because the 4's will cancel. Now, when I want to reverse this statement, I need to reverse everything. So I need the x to be on the other side, and I need the 13 to be on the other side, and I have to flip this sign. So I have to completely reverse everything when I rewrite my inequalities. Now having the variable on the right side isn't wrong. Having it on the left side just makes it easier to graph. So I need 13 and 14 and 12. Since it was the equal to, I'm going to make a solid circle. And now it's less than 13, so I'm going to shade everything to the left. Now the way it was written before, it was 13 is greater than or equal to x. So that tells me that 13 is greater than my answers. So again, I could still shade to the left and make sense out of this statement on the graph, but I think just from experience, having that variable on the left side makes the statement read a little bit more familiar, in a more familiar way, so that you're able to graph it more accurately. Okay, last two. We have negative 11 is less than t plus 6. So I have to get the t by itself. And to do that, I have to subtract the 6. So that's negative 17 is less than t. And then when I reverse it, I'm going to switch the t and the negative 17 and the sign in the middle. So now instead of negative 17 being less than t, I have t is greater than negative 17. So I'm going to have negative 17 on my number line, and negative 16 and negative 18. I have an open circle since it's just greater than, and then I'm going to shade everything to the right. Okay, now part F, I'm going to simplify it first, just like we did in part C. Since I have a minus and negative y, I'm going to make it a plus y. And then to get the y by itself, I'm going to have to subtract the 8 to both sides. So 13 minus 8 is 5, which is less than or equal to y. And then I'm going to completely rewrite my expression here. So I have y is greater than or equal to 5. So I'll put 5 and 6 and 4 on the number line. Solid circle on the 5. I'm going to shade everything greater than 5. Now there's one little hint that you might have noticed. If you look at our graphs, you'll notice that we've shaded on the graph the direction that the inequality arrow is pointing. So here I had a less than, so the little arrow, the little triangle is kind of pointing to the left. That's the way I shaded on my number line. Okay. Here I had the arrow was pointing to the right, so I shaded to the right. Here the arrow is pointing to the left, so I shaded to the left. So that's another clue that you can use to double check your work and make sure that you're graphing correctly. Okay, so remember, you need an open circle when it's just less than or greater than, closed circle if you have the equal tos, and then you have to shade to the right or shade to the left. So definitely practice this homework. You don't need graph paper. You can just make the little number lines on your own. And if you have any questions, come on in and see me before school.